if you remember very well. Through the last videos I've made about Boss Baby 2, one of the things I've mentioned most that was wrong. The movie was how they introduced Tina in the last scene of Boss Baby 1 to what we saw in the second movie. Well, actually, this was not a mistake. You see, this baby that we see here is not Tina, and this last scene that we see from the first movie, didn't it happen before Boss Baby 2? And although, as we saw in my past videos, there are several things that point to, yes, this is before Boss Baby 2. But the reality is that this is a cameo or a scene for what's coming in Boss Baby 3. But before your brain comes out of your nose, I'm going to explain how all this works. First, let's set aside the fact that this is a scene after Boss Baby 2. For those who didn't know, the events of the first movie happened in the 70s, while for the second movie, there aren't many things that can tell us what year this story took place. I tried to base it on things that appeared in the movie, like the cameo that Spirit had, to thus calculate roughly a date for this story. But the Spirit movie was released in the year 2002, and Ted already has global positioning system on a smartphone, which is not very easy to distinguish in terms of its design. It seems to be a borderless smartphone like the ones there are today, but at the same time it seems that it still has a physical button and that it has no borders at the top. A bit confusing, but what is certain is that it has a very nice protector. The truth is that I searched almost everywhere and my last resort was advertising. For the second movie, where Tina is seen holding an article about Baby Corporation, I looked for the date of the article in this image, but unfortunately, it's not visible. And all of this continued until a few days ago, when finally, the official wiki for Boss Baby 2 was published, which is only available in English. This wiki says 40 years after the events of the first movie, which means the events of Boss Baby. 2 happened in 2010, but the final scene of the first movie takes place in 2017. This is confirmed by the date on the baby's crib, which, by the way, is the date the first movie was released. All of this points to the last scene of the first movie happening after the events of the second movie. Besides, if you remember, in the second movie we could notice that Ted and Tim were not very close, so to speak. All of this changed when Tina brought them together and made them have that sibling connection they had lost over the years. Compared to this other scene where Tim and Ted clearly get along very well. Now, there are 1 or 2 things that I mentioned in my videos. Would they still put this scene before what happened in the second movie? Like, for example, that Tim tells Tabata everything that happened in the first movie, while, as we saw in the second movie, she still doesn't believe him. Or the other thing, being that Tabata tells her Uncle Ted that she doesn't want a little sister, but rather she wants a horse. And this, according to, had connection with the second movie, although instead of a horse, they gave her a pony. These details may simply be to disorient us and keep us confused about when this scene happens. But the reality is that these things can be easily resolved with simple logic. Tim may not have told Tabata about the events of the first movie. And what Tabata didn't believe her dad was Tim's story that she heard in the kitchen when he was explaining about Tina to Ted. And why now? She wanted to know the first story since her new little sister had just been born. As for the horse, she may have simply grown up. In the events of the second movie, she was 7 years old, so in this scene, she should now be 14 years old. Ponies don't grow much, but she must have grown, so as her pony no longer fits her, now she wants a horse. Well, now that we've sorted these matters, let's see who this baby over here is. And also, if this girl is actually Tabata, as she has a few differences from what we saw in the second movie. First, let's start with Tabata. Despite many people mentioning that this girl is not Tabata, I found several aspects that confirm she is indeed her. First, she has the same hairstyle. Second, her face is almost the same but with a few differences. This can be explained by the type of animation that was done at that time, and it was obvious that 4 years later, these animations were going to improve. And finally, she carries the little lamb that Tim gave her in the second movie. With all this said, we can confirm that this girl here is indeed Tabata. But as for the baby appearing in this scene, obviously she is not Tina. First, because of her physical characteristics. This baby is a bit chubbier than Tina, her face is different, and her hair is a different color. The tie that Tina was wearing is also a different color than this baby's. Besides, if we remember, the events of the second movie happened in 2010, while this baby's birth date is in 2017. So Tina should be at least 7, 8 or 9 years old for this scene, which would no longer qualify her as a baby. And if we remember, in the first movie, Ted could decide whether to stay in charge of Baby Corp or go back to his brother Tim. But if Ted went back to Tim, he would forget everything that happened at Baby Corporation, something we clearly saw in the second movie. So maybe Tina just isn't present in this scene because she stayed working at Baby Corp, or she simply stayed with her mom. Which leads us to the several theories I have about who this baby is. There are several aspects in the baby that make us think very crazy things, but with sense. Like, for example, if we remember, Ted is the one who has blonde hair of these two brothers. So it may be that this baby here is not Tim's daughter, but Ted's daughter. But if we remember, Ted tells Tabata that she will soon have a new little sister, so it may be that Ted was the one who had the daughter with Tim's wife. But we really don't know this. Since it would be a difficult topic to explain to the audience of this movie, so let's just leave it at that she is Ted's daughter. The second theory has to do with the end of the second movie. If we remember, one of the characters introduced to us at the beginning of this installment was Carol, Tim's wife. She was the only one in the family, apart from Tim's parents, who was not present during the actions of Baby Corporation. And yes, in the end she was zombified, and they may have explained to her what happened. But like every negligent parent that appears in movies, she may have overlooked it. In the last scene, Tina doesn't answer her phone, and it's Carol who answers it. "Tina, we have another mission for you. Tell me everything." She clearly hears how they're giving Tina a new mission, and from there we don't know what else happened. Due to this event, different things may have happened. One is that she simply accepted it and continued her life with Tim. Or she may not have wanted this for her children, so she divorced Tim and took Tina with her. And the baby we see here is the daughter of Tim's new wife. In fact, these theories may sound logical, but at the same time, very obscure. And there are certain obscure things in the movie Boss Baby, but these are easier to explain with the fantasy and animation of a children's movie than mature situations, like divorces or intra-family romances. Which leaves us with the last explanation, which is probably the definitive one, about who this baby is. In case you didn't know yet, the Boss Baby movie was inspired by a children's book by author Marla Frazee, which came out in 2010. The book, titled The Boss Baby, was the inspiration for the events of the first movie and the second movie as well. But there's not just one book about the Boss Baby, there's also a sequel called The Bossier Baby, or The Baby. More boss, where the events of the first boss in diapers continue. But a new baby arrives at the house, who is much more bossy and demanding. She starts to enslave Ted's parents, and in the book, Ted's parents are called minions. And they really like being bossed around by the new boss in diapers, who arrived at their home. If we look in the book, this baby arrives with a tablet and a completely dark suit. In 2010, tablets were not as common as in 2017, and this book was published at the end of 2016. So it may actually be that almost the same thing happens as in the first movie. Because, if you remember, neither of Tim's parents have blonde hair or features similar to Ted's. But still, they received Ted from Baby Corporation. So it may be that in this next installment, Tim and Carol received a baby from Baby Corporation who has these characteristics that we saw in the last scene of the first movie. This baby, who is going to be a super bossy boss, who is going to take care of solving the new crisis of Baby Corporation. Or maybe she is the new villain, this time in the movie, as happened in Marla France's book. Maybe this new baby has power from Baby Corporation and uses it for her evil plans. So Tim and Ted will have to go back to being babies and save Baby Corporation. But these are just theories. What are your thoughts on this baby and the final scene from the first film? How would you interpret them? Hello, little sister Linda.